Welcome to Dirt Nap City. This is the show about interesting people who happen to be dead. I'm Alex. This is Kelly.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
And season 1, remember the big season finale will be episode about Kelly, R.I.P.
Right.
Now, season 1 could be 40, 50, 60 years long, you know. But remember, season 2 begins with just me by myself.
Yeah, we're talking seasons in the biblical sense.
Yeah. We've gotten great response to our first 2 episodes, and even some emails.
Yeah.
So I have
an
email here.
That exciting international email?
Well, I got one here. I got about 60 here, but I'll read one. And this is from Dave in Dublin. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Dave. Thanks for listening.
The nice part about podcasts, you don't have to worry about time differences.
True.
But Dave asks, how do you guys know each other? Are you brothers? And why do you have such great chemistry?
Yeah. Well, Dave, actually, Alex and I are sort of brothers, not in the clinical or biological sense, but more brothers in the sense that we have known each other since we were adolescents. We hung out together in high school, in college, and had a little bit of a break from each other for a few years, but now are hanging out together again.
I think actually, I was thinking about this the other day. I think of all the people that I still talk to, you are my oldest, not oldest, you're my longest. You've been my friend for the longest. Yeah. I've known you for the longest of anybody that's not in my family and longer than my wife. So I think like if my mom and dad are number 1 and 2, you're probably number 3 of the people that I talk to that have known me since I was the youngest.
Yeah, we were like 15.
I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
And now we're way past that. And so that was in the 80s, folks. We started hanging out together in the 80s.
Yeah. So you're a person of a certain age that grew up in a certain time period, the 70s and 80s.
They said I was the Peter Piper of the 1980s, actually.
Who said that?
Some rap group.
So today's subject is very much a person of that was popular for people of that time.
Okay.
When we grew up.
Okay. Should I guess? Or should I wait for a couple more clues?
But if that was the first clue, you can guess. That would be amazing if you guessed.
Ronald Reagan.
No. Born in 1938, died in 2007. This person was an icon in the 1970s. Icon.
Okay.
And it was a guy, a male, and probably one of the more acceptable guys that a boy would have a poster of in his room in the 1970s. I mean, who do you got? Who'd you have posters of? Like Farrah Fawcett, Charlie's Angels, the other Charlie's Angels, Kiss, maybe?
None of the above.
You never who'd you have a poster of?
I was not your normal poster kid. I had a Husker Du poster. I had a
in the 70s? You didn't have that in the 70s.
Oh, I think I had a Star Wars poster in the 70s.
Okay.
So died in 2007, born in 1930. Would be acceptable to have a poster of him in your room. I know
Meaning,
a lot of people.
It's not like Sean Cassidy. Like that would not be acceptable for a guy to have a poster of Sean Cassidy in his room in the
70s. Yeah,
maybe Kiss, but just of a one dude, this would be acceptable. He took himself very seriously, but most people mocked him.
Was he a musician, a comedian? What
was not either one of those, but I'll give you one final clue that'll make you get it.
Okay.
When you were a kid, you probably heard that he broke every bone in his body.
Oh, yes. Evel Knievel.
Evel Knievel, folks.
Yes.
If you're of the millennial or Gen Z, you might not know Evel Knievel. But Evel Knievel was the guy. Like when we were kids, and we were like, I'm talking to 6, 7, 8 years old. He was the dude. He was a freaking daredevil. And you used to go out on recess and talk about, oh, Evel Knievel broke every bone in his body.
Except his pinky.
Yeah. And that would give you permission to go down the slide head first.
Right. My latest experience with Evel Knievel, I just watched not too long ago a documentary about his son. I think Robbie Knievel. Is that
Robbie
his son's name?
Knievel, right? Yeah.
He tried to jump Snake River, the canyon that Evel Knievel crashed into all those years ago. And there's a documentary on Netflix about that was pretty good.
But it's about Robbie?
Yeah. It's about Robbie and like getting permission from the state and actually contacting somebody to build the rocket for him and like the whole process. And sadly, I can't remember if he succeeds or not in the movie. I remember the process leading up to it, but I don't remember if he actually makes it.
I think he did. I think he did actually succeed.
I think he actually overshot it by a lot.
Well, we're going to get into all that. The life of Evel Knievel. Really, well, remember the qualification you need. There's 2 things you need to be on Dirt Nap City. Remember?
Yeah, you have to be famous and dead.
You have to be interesting.
Yeah, interesting.
Famous.
Okay.
You don't necessarily have to be famous. Like
That's
I said,
true.
we're going to get to everybody eventually.
There are some interesting non-famous people.
Yeah. And in fact, I think that we joke about you being on this show. I think you have some work to do, my friend.
Yeah. I know. I definitely need to work on my interesting factor.
Yeah.
That's part of why I'm doing this
good.
podcast. That's what you're going to talk about is the fact that I founded this podcast.
How to be interesting.
Right.
Well, one way to do it is to break every bone in your body.
Except your pinky.
Right. Now, I don't think that was true, actually. I don't think he broke every bone in his body, but as you'll see, he came pretty close.
Yeah, and he's one of those people. He is exactly the type of person you pick. It's an excellent pick because he's somebody I know the name, I know a little bit about, I know some legends about, but there's so much more that I don't know. And even that movie that I watched didn't really talk about Evel. He talked more about Robbie in today's quest. So this is going to be great.
All right. Well, let's start with the name. First of all, his real name was Robert or Bobby Knievel, but he was kind of a troublemaker, as you might imagine a daredevil would be. You'd probably be disappointed if you learned that he wasn't a troublemaker.
Yeah. If he was just a school marm, it wouldn't be that exciting.
Sure. So he left high school after his sophomore year. He grew up in Montana, and he went to work in the copper mines. And he drove heavy equipment at the copper mines, but he actually got fired after he made one of the, I guess it was like an earth mover, he made it do a wheelie, and he drove it into a power line, and he cut off the power to the whole city for a couple hours.
Wow. Okay. That's really, really on character, on brand for him, right?
He was like 16 when he did that.
Yeah.
So he was arrested for reckless driving when he was about 18, and he spent the night in jail in Montana. And here's the moment that everything changed, is that also in jail that night. And let me say, I don't believe this story, but this is an apocryphal story that is legend, right? I hope it is true, but I can't verify this. Also in jail that night with Bobby Knievel was a guy named William Knivel. Knofel.
All right.
And his nickname was Awful Knivel.
That sounds made up.
Totally sounds made up. But this is the story that he went with the rest of his life, and said this guy, Awful Knivel, a couple of jailbirds got together, and before the night was through, we had Awful Knivel and Evel Knievel.
Wow. Did they pick those, or did he pick that nickname, or was it given to him by the guards, or did they say?
Awful Knivel already had that name.
Yeah, but Evel.
His name was Knievel. Yeah, his name was already Knievel. Like right. That part's not made up.
Right.
Knaufel, Knievel, potato.
Right.
Tomato, tomato.
Shamal, Coffin Pfeffer Incorporated.
But here's the thing, that even though it rhymed, Evel Knievel, he rode motorcycles. And back in the 60s, the only thing that people knew about motorcycle riders were the Hells Angels, right? And they were a bunch of also scofflaws, but they kind of had a dark side to them, right? And he did not want to be associated with the Hells Angels guys at all. So he changed the spelling of evil to Evel to make it sound less evil.
Really? I always wondered because I knew it wasn't Evil. So he did that on purpose as a branding thing.
Yeah, and it kind of works when you think about him, because even though his name is Evil, I don't think of the guy as evil.
No,
I just think of evil that it rhymes with Knievel.
It's like today when people say sick, right? Kids say that was sick. Well, they don't actually mean it was sick. They just mean it was awesome, you know? So I think it was evil in the same sense as kids use the word sick today.
Yeah, like bad meaning bad, bad meaning good.
Yeah. Yeah. Not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good.
We should have a whole separate podcast where we just break down teen lingo, I think.
Yeah, and rap lyrics.
All right, so back to our friend Evel Knievel. He was a pretty athletic type, but also kind of a daredevil type. So he was a professional skier. He rode in rodeos. He was a semi-pro hockey player. He went in the army where he pole vaulted.
Wait. Pole vaulted in the army?
Yeah, they had like a track team this is the early 60s. They had like a track team in the army, and he
so I guess that could be useful in battle, like if you were trying to get over a castle wall.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, like a moat or
something. They're pouring the hot oil over the wall, and you have to get over. So you just pole vault, and you go right over the hot oil.
I could see that in combat. Yeah, sure. So he joined the motocross circuit in 1962 and broke his collarbone. And this is the first of many broken bones. While he was recovering from that injury, he started selling insurance, and he actually got pretty good at it. And he read a book on positive mental attitude at that time that he said later that changed his life.
Okay.
He had this positive attitude about everything, and he actually kind of stopped riding and was doing well as a suit. And when he didn't get promoted at the insurance company, his insurance dreams fell apart. He moved up to Washington and opened a motorcycle dealership, a Honda dealership. And there was another. So far we have two turning points: the awful Knaufel. We have the guy that the positive leadership or positive mental attitude.
Yeah.
The third thing is when he was at the motorcycle dealership, he was screwing around one day, and a guy taught him how to pop a wheelie on a motorcycle and ride standing up.
Wow.
But as you know, as a child of the 70s, popping a wheelie, riding standing up, that all flowed down to all of us on our bikes, right?
Yeah, banana seats.
Did you learn how to pop a wheelie?
I was never any good at that, no.
You tried?
Not really. It wasn't. I yes, maybe a couple times, but I never put a real effort into it. But I was always impressed with the kids, not just pop a wheelie, but ride a wheelie. Could balance that thing and ride that way. No, that was never a superpower that I had.
Now most of those kids then became like skateboarders, right? Skate punks.
Yeah, and BMX kids, I suppose.
Yeah, popping a wheelie is kind of the gateway to all that stuff.
Or there's that one where you put the front brake on and you lean forward and you ride on the front wheel.
Yeah, and I think without Evel Knievel, nobody is doing that stuff.
No, that was probably a big influence on that culture.
Yeah, for sure. So in his life, he had 75 jumps.
Okay.
All right. And what I mean is
documented.
These were tricks. Documented with a crowd, a paid crowd. And usually they would come at the beginning. He would do it so people would come out to the motocross shows, and it would be like entertainment, kind of halftime entertainment or something. Or maybe the main event at some points where, he started. The very first jump he ever did was he jumped over a rattlesnake and 2 mountain lions.
Were they all in the same space? Like 2 dead mountain lions and a hungry or very full rattlesnake?
I mean, you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And then he started jumping over things like pickup trucks.
Yeah, and buses.
Yeah, and then he worked his way up. Then a speeding motorcycle, then 12 cars, and then 13, 14, 15, 16 cars, and then a VW bus. This was the 70s, you know. Did you guys have a VW bus growing up?
My wife did, but I did not.
I pictured your family to have a VW
Yeah,
bus all these years.
that actually would be pretty. We had a Pinto,
Kind of like the Mystery Mobile.
right? The Mystery Machine.
I'm sorry, Mystery Machine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the big one that put them on the map was the fountains at Caesar's Palace. And that one did not go well. There's a very famous crash that happened at that we'll get to. But he saw the Caesar's Palace fountains one time, and he said, I'm going to jump over that in a motorcycle. Then you get to 17 cars, 18 cars, 19 cars, then 13 Pepsi trucks.
Oh, sponsored by Coca-Cola.
Then 100 rattlesnakes and 2 vans. I think the rattlesnakes are important because there's an element of, if you mess up the jump, not only are you going to break bones. See, breaking bones wasn't scary anymore.
Yeah.
Because he's breaking bones every time, you know. I think the element of, no, you're going to fall in a rattlesnake pit too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Kind of adds to the danger, especially this is the Pacific Northwest, you know.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. California, Washington, Montana, Idaho. This is where he used to do all this stuff. Nevada. 22 cars in 1972. And then at the LA Coliseum, 50 cars, jumping over 50 cars. Now we're getting to around the time where you and I start hearing them in the early 70s.
Yeah.
Then, 10 Mack trucks, 11 Mack trucks. The thing that got him real famous, and you alluded to this earlier, was the Snake River Canyon, 1974.
Yeah.
He'd always said he wanted to jump the Grand Canyon, but truth is he would have had to get so many permits from the U.S. government to do that. That was never going to happen. But, a lot of people think he did that. I think he talked about it so much, and the Snake River Canyon looked kind of Grand Canyon-ish.
Yeah.
That I'll bet you almost every day when people go to the Grand Canyon, I bet they ask, where did Evel Knievel jump?
There's probably even a gift shop that sells souvenirs from that, even though it didn't happen.
Right. So the Snake River Canyon is actually in Idaho. And he didn't jump over it in a motorcycle. Did you know that?
Yeah, it was a rocket.
It was a steam-powered rocket, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, when you think about the early 70s, we were doing moonshots quite a bit. There was people going up to the moon every year, it seemed like. And rockets were kind of the thing. He took a steam-powered rocket. Originally, it was going to be a rocket kind of attached to a motorcycle, but then eventually it just was going to be a rocket. So when you look at the video of this thing, it's up at about it seems like a 60-degree angle.
Yeah, it's pointing nearly straight up.
Yeah. And do you remember what happened, the results of that?
Yeah, it fell short. Didn't the parachute come out early?
Exactly. So the parachute came out early and carried him. He probably would have cleared it, but the parachute came out early. The parachute was supposed to bring him down to the other earth side after he cleared it. Right.
Yeah.
What happened instead was the parachute came out early and then brought him down to earth and back towards the side that he launched from. And he actually landed just a few feet from the river. Later, he mentioned that if he actually would have landed in the river, he probably would have drowned because his harness to get him out of the seat didn't work.
Oh, it was stuck.
And they had to cut him out. So if he had landed in the river, he probably would have died right there from drowning. But he didn't. But he ended up on the same side that he took off from, and it was considered kind of a failure.
Wah wah.
But the next year he was back at Wembley, jumping 13 buses. Kings Island, the amusement park in Ohio, 14 Greyhound buses. And then 1977, he jumped over 13 sharks. And
Oh yeah,
remember
I remember that.
that's the year that Jaws came out. So, he was absolutely always kind of taking what was popular and
Yeah.
incorporated into his shows. So he jumped over 13 sharks. And then later that year, Fonzie did it on Happy Days.
That's right. That's right. And didn't Fonzie crash?
I don't know.
I don't. I seem to recall there, or maybe
I thought
alluded.
Pinky Tuscadero crashed.
Maybe
she did it.
Maybe they alluded to him crashing right before commercial, and then so you
or
come
part
back.
one part. I think it was a two-parter.
Yeah. Pinky Tuscadero. You remember the Malachi Crunch, the brothers in the Demolition Derby, and they would smash on either side. Because wasn't Fonzie involved in some demolition derbies too?
I'm not sure about that.
But that's another story.
It is another story.
Henry Winkler's got to die first.
That term, jumping the shark, obviously comes from Happy Days. You know what the term jumping the shark means?
No.
Have you heard that term in pop culture?
I think I have, but please remind me of the underlying meaning.
Well, it usually refers to the point in the lifespan of a show or a band or something where it gets bad. Like everything was good before this happened, and then they kind of jump.
Cousin Oliver shows up.
Exactly. Yeah, they added a kid, or Cousin Oliver is a perfect example. They kind of, and the contention was that Happy Days was good before Fonzie jumped the shark and bad after he jumped the shark.
Right.
Actually, Henry Winkler has pointed out on a number of occasions that they won Emmys after he jumped the shark. It was still the number one show on TV for a couple of years. It was probably more realistically, it actually jumped the shark when Joni and Chachi spinned it off.
Yeah,
but that's also another story for another day.
Absolutely. So he succeeded. Evel Knievel did jump over the sharks.
He did jump over the sharks, and when you say succeeded, he did jump over the sharks. He broke his collarbone and his arm.
Oh, he crashed on the other side.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you some of these injuries. All right. So he's in the Guinness Book of World Record for the most broken bones in a lifetime. When I was a kid, I always wanted to be in the Guinness Book, but never for this.
Not for that. No. There's certain things you don't want to be in it for.
You ever broke a bone?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Broken, both my ankles, one of them twice. And I dislocated my shoulder and also, broke. What's the opposite of dislocation? It's
relocation.
No, there's like one way where it goes out this way and one way where it comes in this way. But anyway, shoulders and ankles are my two big weaknesses.
Wow. No, I've only broken my nose and can't really do anything for that, but I've never broken a bone. But I can't imagine that it's fun.
No.
It probably hurts. I'm guessing it hurts.
Especially multiple bones. You can imagine just like you got this pain in your lower extremity, but you also have a pain in your arm, because they're both broken. Yeah. That would be terrible.
Yeah. So the Caesar's Palace was by far the worst. In fact, there's a YouTube video. I watched it preparing for this, and there's even a disclaimer at the beginning that you might not want to watch this.
Yeah.
Now, the resolution isn't that great, so it's not that grisly. If it was in HD, it would have been pretty gnarly. But yeah, so that was a 141-foot jump and over the Caesar's Palace fountains, and he crashed on the landing, and he was in the hospital for 29 days with a broken ribs, broken hip, crushed pelvis.
Oh,
now that doesn't sound fun.
No, but still lived to ride again.
Not only ride again, that was on New Year's 1967, New Year's Eve. And he was back in May 68, jumping over 13 cars.
Yeah.
So he was in the hospital for a month. And then 4 months after that, he was jumping again.
Wow.
And here's the thing. He always said later in life that the number one thing for him was he was a man of his word. So if he promised somebody he was going to do a jump, by God, he was going to do a jump, even if he wasn't feeling it, even if he thought, well, this is probably not going to go well. These people came to see me. I'm going to jump, even if it means some broken bones. which is a really interesting way to look at death defying a job like that. I'm going to do it come hell or high water.
Yeah, it's not like they talk about live to fight another day or just kind of like safety first, but no, he said my honor comes first, safety comes second.
Exactly. So the morning of the Caesar's Palace jump, he went to the casino and placed his, I don't know why it says last $100, but it said he placed his last $100 on the blackjack table and lost. So right there, most people would be like, no, this is a bad omen.
Bad sign, yeah.
He lost his money, then went to the bar, had a shot of wild turkey, and then went inside, and there was some showgirls there, kissed the showgirls, and then did his ride. That's just a badass.
That is totally to a different era, right? That is the kind of thing that even the most amazing person of today, the best athletes of today, that would not be their routine, right? He probably smoked a cigarette in there too.
Yeah. So like I said, that was New Year's. Then 5 months later, he's back jumping 13 cars, broke his leg in that jump. Later that year, he broke his shoulder and his hip. In 1970, he broke his collarbone jumping the Pepsi trucks. He cracked his ribs and fractured his vertebrae later on in July. That was May, July. Cracked his vertebrae, broke his shoulder and hand
Goodness.
in August. Broke his hand the next year. Broke his ankle, collarbone, and back in 72. Bruised his kidneys in 73. Broke his back and his nose in 74. Broke his pelvis in 75. And broke his collarbone in his arm jumping the sharks in 77. So, we're in elementary school at that time. We're just fascinated by this guy. That's every time. Now, he would be on TV a lot doing this too. Wide World of Sports is where you'd see this. You remember ABC Wide World of Sports?
Of course.
He tried to get them to televise the Caesar's Palace jump, and they didn't want to do it. But he just became such a mainstream name, like a thing that you heard about, even if it wasn't on TV, that they didn't have any choice but to have to show them. So he was on TV a lot doing these jumps, and I don't know if they were live or anything, but we always seem to know about them.
It was always the big topic at school the next Monday, right? You get back, like you said, you'd be out on the playground and I'm Evel Knievel. Ah,
yeah. And you know what? You asked if these jumps were successful. Most of them were successful in that he cleared whatever he was trying to jump.
Right.
Sometimes he would,
clear and then kind of shake and land and crash his bike.
Yeah, he would land on the ramp and the bike would go out from under him and he would crash. Or that Caesar's Palace one is nasty because he just kind of lands on his head.
Ugh.
Yeah.
He did always wear a helmet, though.
In fact, he was an advocate of helmet laws and used to go around to different states saying, I'm the advertisement for why helmets should be
right. I wouldn't be here if I didn't wear a helmet.
Yeah, brain bucket. Right. Exactly. Do you know what kind of motorcycles he rode?
They always kind of looked like dirt bike kind of things. Like I'm going to guess Suzuki.
Well, his very first one was Honda.
Well, he worked for a Honda dealership, right? So
yeah, but then he never rode those again. And when you think about it, he switched to a Norton. Do you know Norton?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, he rode Nortons for a while, and then in '67 he switched to Triumph. The Triumph is the British made.
Yeah, but I always thought of those as more as road bikes. Like not. Did they make those sort of more dirt bikey, big shocks, jumping kind of things?
Yeah, and in fact, in the '70s, he switched to Harleys, and he rode Harleys throughout the '70s. And I don't think of those as dirt bikes either. But he always rode this 750cc and rode the Harleys till the end. Harleys. At some point, he kind of switched his persona to be very pro-American, right?
Yeah, with the flags and the eagles and the red, white, and blue.
And his outfit, if you remember, when you picture Evel Knievel, what are you picturing?
Yeah, he's got the
what
cape.
Is he wearing?
He's got the cape and the white with the stars and stripes on it. Yeah.
Who else in the '70s wore
Elvis.
an outfit? Exactly.
Yeah. And he did break his pelvis. So
there you go.
I'm seeing the I've seen the Evel Knievel, Elvis the Pelvis. There's lots of
Awful
crossover.
Knievel.
Yeah.
We should do one on Awful Knievel sometime and find out what happened to that guy.
Yeah. Part 2.
Maybe it wasn't interesting enough.
Maybe that's premium content for our Patreon supporters.
So when you think about him being the Elvis of his time and of the or of the same time, but Elvis of Daredevil, he had the big belt buckle, he had the cape, he had the white suit, lots of red, white, and blue all over it. It just made sense to ride American bikes.
True. Yeah, I guess somebody would have pointed out that, if he was riding a Honda or a Suzuki, that didn't really jibe.
Absolutely. So like I said, he was a never go back on your word guy, and also very much anti-drug and helmet law. And that was his big thing. He used to go around to schools and preach anti-drug message, which in the 70s, he's one of the first kind of anti-drug people going around, pre Nancy Reagan, do you remember Toma? Do you remember that guy Toma?
No, I don't know who that is.
I think he was the guy that they made the show Beretta after.
Oh, okay.
I think his name was David Toma. He used to come around I thought he came around to we didn't go to elementary school, folks, together.
Did Beretta, is he the one that had the parrot?
Yeah. Parakeet, yeah.
Or parakeet,
but
okay.
This guy was like, scared straight kind of a fellow. He used to go around and
so him and
tell us how bad
were doing this together.
Not jointly,
in the same time period. So you mentioned the last jump I think you mentioned was 77. Like, did he jump into the 80s?
No, he had a couple that he had scheduled, but in Australia, and I don't know if he went back on his word or if he wasn't available or if they couldn't. From what the reading I've done on this guy, the only thing that could keep him from doing something maybe is if they didn't pay him.
Well, I think probably in Australia, because it's Southern Hemisphere, you have to jump the other opposite direction, right? And so it probably was a whole different deal, and maybe he just didn't have time to train for that, because Australian jumping it's like the water. You know how the water spins the other direction.
That's a good point. No, actually, in the 80s, he fell out of favor. And mostly because of this one incident. So a guy wrote a book about him, and it was an unflattering book. In fact, it talked about how he did do drugs and how he beat his wife. And one time, Evel Knievel was waiting for this guy to come out of a club or something and beat the pulp out of this guy.
Wait, for the author? The author of the book?
Now, at the time, Evel Knievel had 2 casts. He had broken both arms, and he beat up this guy
with the cast.
Which I don't know if that makes it easier or harder to beat up somebody with. Well,
casts are pretty hard. I mean, that would be just kind of like playing drums on his head.
It must have been what he did, because you can't really bend your arms.
Yeah,
but you do have these 2 plaster. Anyways, he shattered the other guy's arm in the process, and that guy basically lost the use of his arm. He lost all of his endorsements. This was in 1981. Lost all of his endorsements, declared bankruptcy, had a rough 1980s.
Wow.
And then 1994 was arrested for beating his girlfriend.
Oh, man.
Look, folks, I told you a couple episodes ago, this is Dirt Nap City. We're not here to praise these people. We're not here to bury them. They're just, it is what it is, man. Some good people do bad things. Some bad people do good. We're just looking for the truth here.
Yeah.
So that girl, they got married after that in 1999. And even though she had a restraining order on him, that didn't matter. They stayed together until he died in 2007, and she inherited all of his money. They made a rock opera of his life, Evel Knievel's life, in 2003. I got really excited because in my research, it said that Jeff Beck made an opera of him. And then I noticed that Beck was spelled B-E-K.
So kind of like evil was, it was B-E-K-E-V-I-L. It was a different Evel Knievel, actually.
So it wasn't that Jeff Beck, but it actually got pretty good reviews. That it was a
Huh.
kind of campy rock
Was
opera
it
about
a
Evel Knievel's
movie
life.
or a stage play,
A
stage production,
stage
like in New
production.
York or something?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So in 1999, he actually, he had a lot of bad health. He had hepatitis. He needed a liver transplant, and ironically, he got a liver transplant in 1999 from a guy who died in a motorcycle accident.
wow. Yeah, that's full circle right there.
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
He had multiple strokes. He was doing so bad health wise that in 2006, because of the liver transplant and because of all the broken bones in his lifetime, they actually installed a morphine pump inside his body, kind of like the kind you have at the hospital where you just push the button.
Yeah.
But it was inside his
And it was
body.
activated with each heartbeat. So each time his heart beat, it triggered a little bit of morphine.
I guess so. I don't know exactly how that works, but man, you imagine how much pain you have to be in.
Yeah. Well,
Now it's
and
mostly his back is just totally
that probably
deteriorated.
wasn't fake. That was probably real pain. I mean, I would imagine, as
Oh,
as you get older, those injuries turn into arthritis and turn into stiff joints, and when it rains, you can feel it in your knee. And I mean, my goodness, yeah, that right there though is somebody that lived for the young years and maybe wasn't thinking too much about what's it going to be like when I'm 60, 70 years old.
I think this guy actually had both. He lived to be 69 years old,
Yeah.
but his candle burned bright. And I don't think there's a lot of people that do that live
do
that
both.
hard, that
Well,
live that long.
although it sounds like his last 20 years was not very pleasant, right? He had a lot of health issues. He was in a lot of pain. He was accused of stuff. He was getting into fights. I mean, you know what I mean? It doesn't sound like those were his golden years.
Really, the last 30 years.
Yeah. His golden years were much earlier in his life.
Yeah, I guess the 70s is when he burned the brightest.
Yeah, for sure. Like I guess a meteor coming through the atmosphere, as it gets closer to the ground, it burns less because it's burned up. Like it's basically exhausted its fuel.
Yeah. Do you know who gave the eulogy at his funeral?
I started with Ronald Reagan. I'm going to guess Ronald Reagan again.
This was 2007.
Oh, wasn't Hulk Hogan?
Oh, no. Wouldn't that be funny if Hulk Hogan, we had another one who
He just goes around and gives eulogies. No, who gave Evel Knievel's eulogy?
Matthew McConaughey,
Wow.
who's our age,
Yeah.
but they became friends. Matthew McConaughey has been wanting to make a biopic and play Evel Knievel ever since he had the power to do that. He's been trying to get a script together.
He should just watch this episode or listen to this episode. And
that's what I was thinking.
He really had. The script is done, Matthew.
They look very similar.
Yeah.
That at his age, later in life, I think Evel Knievel might have had some plastic surgeries that didn't go so well. But at that point, what do you have to lose?
Yeah. It's like when you get a tattoo and then people say, well, that's not going to look great when you're 80. Like, so nothing's going to look great when I'm 80. Who cares?
That's a really good point. I've never heard that argument, but that's a really good point.
Yeah.
But this eulogy was really touching, and they gave, as the casket entered the arena, they had fireworks going off. It was kind of what you would expect from somebody like
Where was he buried? Was he buried in Montana?
Yeah, and it was a fully attended Butte, Montana.
Butte, Montana.
In like a civic center, an arena type. So what I want to talk about now is the legacy of Evel Knievel.
Yeah.
Now that we can look back and say, well, what was this guy's legacy beyond just you and me
lunch
and our
boxes,
friends popping wheelies in our cul-de-sacs.
Lunch boxes, and I think he was responsible for the little motorcycle that you cranked, and you push the button and it would take off.
Sure, and I think Hot Wheels made that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people ripped them off. There were Saturday morning cartoons. There was one called Devlin, that was basically an Evel Knievel ripoff. Obviously, Super Dave
Yeah,
Osborne
Super Dave Osborne. He
was
was more of a parody than a ripoff.
sure, but I guess when I talk about legacy, I'm talking about what exists now that wouldn't have existed if it weren't for Evel Knievel. Some people credit the X Games to Evel Knievel, that there wouldn't, there was a whole generation of people. I think the first X Games were probably people from our generation that, people like, you think about someone like Tony Hawk and how wouldn't have probably, maybe wouldn't have been inspired to do all the things that he did if there weren't an Evel Knievel. All the skateboarders.
They look at him and they see somebody who broke so many bones so many times and yet kept going. And they're like, okay, it's possible. It makes you realize that if you don't die, you can probably get up and do it again, especially if you're young and you mend quickly and, you got the right doctors and all that stuff. But yeah, it maybe inspired people to push their limits a little more because they realized how hard Evel had pushed it, and he still ended up dying of quote unquote natural causes later in life. He didn't die from smacking into a wall.
Do you believe that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
Yeah, I do believe that.
Well, I guess Evel Knievel is the example of that. Although his bones were probably not stronger. His bones were probably weak as hell.
Well, and stronger is a relative term. Stronger, do you mean stronger physically? Because, something could put you in a coma, and are you stronger? No. But so I'd say in most cases, I believe it. There are some exceptions.
So, yeah. So you look at guys like Tony Hawk, you look at the X Games, even there's a lot of Olympic sports these days. Olympics have been trying to
snowboarding.
Oh my gosh. A lot of sports that are more kind of daredevilish than, aerial sports that didn't used to be a thing. But he really probably influenced all that stuff. He was, man for the right time.
That whole description you had of him jumping over Caesar's Palace and putting $100 on the roulette table and doing a shot of Jack and smoking a cigarette and kissing the showgirls. That was a time, right? That was the kind of stuff that you did in the 70s, but that doesn't really fly today.
Well, there were actors that were kind of like him, like Steve McQueen, just badass guys, men's men, right? Burt Reynolds, guys like that. But then, you don't know what's real. I think for Steve McQueen, it was probably real. Like, he was a really tough guy like that. But they made boys our age want to be cool like him. In fact, Fonzie himself was probably, the idea of being cool and taking risks and all
Black
that kind
leather
of stuff.
jacket and having your office in the bathroom. That's hashtag goals.
Not to get too deep on this, but the whole concept of risk taking, even if it's like not actual risk taking, but like business risk taking, I wonder if he influenced people from our generation in terms of making them riskier, making them realize that what do you have to lose? You might as well go for it, which is
like Shark Tank, right?
Sure, yeah.
And
there's
maybe
another
that's
Shark.
maybe that's where
that's
where Shark Tank kind of got the name. Mark Cuban was a big fan.
You mentioned merchandise before. Before Star Wars, there was Evel Knievel stuff, and we had G.I. Joe, but G.I. Joe wasn't a real person. Star Wars weren't real people either, but action figures of people that actually existed. Evel Knievel lunchboxes and action figures and the little motorcycle thing. I also, though, think that he probably died a wealthy guy. He declared
but not
bankruptcy.
As wealthy as he should have been based on, once again, talking about image and likeness, right? Like he probably wasn't paid what he should have been. He wasn't able to make it rain like he should have been able to.
He used to get about $25,000 for those appearances, and he would do about 4 or 5 a year. And then that's not including any of the licensing. That was just appearance fees, and he was such a famous guy, though, that he was as famous at one time as probably Muhammad Ali.
And even today, young kids who don't know who he is, they've heard the name, right? It rhymes, it runs, it's just it's embedded in our culture. It's
You think
embedded
that's
in
true?
American lore. Oh yeah, I
You
think
think
if
your
I asked,
son knows who Evel Knievel is?
I think he's heard the name. I don't know if he could say he was some sort of stunt guy. Oh, yeah, I'll bet he. I'll ask him. I'll ask him.
And report back to us.
Yeah. So Alex, I mean, overall, what were your thoughts on the guy? Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? Was he a little morally ambiguous? And who knows? But he did some good things.
Evel Knievel was an important person for people from our generation that came up in the 70s. And I think he was a very influential person. And I think you have to respect the fact that this guy came along. Nobody else would have done what he did. He was such a unique person, but he influenced so many people in lots of silly ways, but lots of maybe important ways too for people of our generation. So overall, more positive than negative on the world. I give
More
him a
good
thumbs
than
up.
evil. They should have
Just
called him Good Knievel.
Oh, I like that. Good Knievel. That's what he should have named his son. Good Knievel. So that's it, everybody. That's the life of Evel Knievel. I hope you learned a little bit about Evel Knievel and even less about Awful Knaufel. But thanks for joining us on Dirt Nap City. If you want to contact us, like our friend Dave in Dublin, please contact us at dirtnapcity@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you if you have any suggestions for future episodes. But this has been another episode of Dirt Nap City. Bye, everybody.